garments that they would make. Now what Jesus is saying is this, and notice it carefully. He's saying, despite your bank accounts, you are actually poor and pitiful and wretched. Wow. He says, despite the fact that you think that you have this clinic for sore eyes and the salve that will help them, despite this, Jesus said, you are blind and you think that you have all of these wonderful clothes? He says, you are naked. What Jesus is saying, in the strongest possible way, is simply this: everything that you think you are, you aren't. Have you met people like that? Of course you have, because you're here today, aren't you? Aren't we all that way? Our self-perception is very different than God's self-perception. And so here you have a church that outwardly seemed to be prosperous. They never had false doctrine. At least Jesus doesn't address that like he does some of the other churches. But Jesus is saying to them that inwardly, from what I see, you are very different. And Jesus sees us that way today too. He sees us as to who we really are, including the rot. You remember this past summer we had a great storm here in the city of Chicago, and later on, a day or two later, Rebecca and I walked through a forest preserve. We love to go walking in the forest preserve. And we noticed that some trees were broken over. In fact, I think in Chicago in total, there were more than 2,000 trees that actually blew over. What was interesting is to look at those and to see within, and you discovered that the ones that blew over oftentimes had within them all of that rot and hollowness that you couldn't see from the outside. What a different picture when you look within from the way in which we perceive it from without. And God says, I am the Lord, and I test the human heart. Jesus says that in my presence you are very different than you think you are, and because you are so indifferent and care less, which means that you could care less, I will spit you out of my mouth. Those are the words of Jesus. I'm not making it up. It's in the text. Now, what is the cure that Jesus has? He doesn't leave us there. It's the diagnosis that's very, very serious. And you and I all have very, very serious issues before God. Jesus says this now as we go into the cure. I counsel you. By the way, isn't that wonderful that Jesus is the counselor? I've known people who have paid $100 for half an hour of counseling, and maybe it was worth it. But imagine getting counseling from Jesus, and it's free. Isn't that wonderful? He says, I counsel you. And here's his counsel. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire so that you may be rich. Now, of course, he doesn't mean that salvation is something that we pay for. He's using the terminology of the vendors there in Laodicea. He says, I challenge you, come and buy gold from me. We know, of course, that salvation is free. Ho, everyone that thirsts, comes to the water. Whoever has a need, come buy milk and wine without money and without price. It's all free. That's a quotation, by the way, from Isaiah chapter 55. And Jesus says, of course it's free. But you want the true riches? You come to me. Now look at the text. What else does he say? Buy from me gold refined in the fire so that you may be rich, and white garments that you may clothe yourselves, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen. What Jesus is saying, is all those wonderful clothes. I'm from Laodicea. Look at the labels, And inside, you have all of those imaginations. Inside, you are selfish. You do not love me with your whole heart. Inside, you are filled with all manner of lusts and addictions and all that. Come to me, and I'll give you some real clothes. I'll give you white garments that will cover your sin.
Well, this is Pastor Lutzer, and I do need to emphasize again, where do we go except to Jesus? A couple of things. First of all, he knows exactly what is in our hearts. That can be very frightening, but it can also be very comforting to think that he knows what is in our hearts and still loves us. That is truly, truly amazing. But Jesus not only knows what is in our hearts, he actually has the ability to change us, to set us free, to cleanse us. I urge you today, no matter where you are, you come to Jesus, even as he exhorted this church to do that. Let us do that individually. Let us do that together as the body, and we'll experience his transforming power. Stay tuned, because you'll receive information as to how you can receive these messages for yourself and pass them along to others. God bless you. Have a good day, all day.
Erwin Lutzer, introducing When Jesus Observes Our Hearts, his last message on what Jesus thinks of his church, taken from Revelation chapter 3. Tomorrow, more on regaining the lost fervor we once had for Christ. Running to Win comes to you from the Moody Church in Chicago. We all need to know what Jesus thinks of his church, and this entire series will be sent on CD as our thank you when you give a gift of any amount to support Running to Win. Just call us at 1-800-215-5001. That's 1-800-215-5001. Online, go to offerrtw.com. That's offerrtw, all one word, .com. Or write to Running to Win at Box 11174, Chicago, Illinois 60611. This is Dave McAllister. Join us tomorrow for our next Running to Win.